All right, guys. Well, I have, what do I got? 3 minutes, Josh, to get through this episode before I interfere with your dinner, so I will
No, it's
try to
fine.
go quickly. This is Fiona Apple, second time recovering her with her album When the Pawn. I'll get to that in a second. It's a second studio album. We previously covered her debut album, Tidal, in this season, several weeks. I don't know the episode number, but it's out there. This album was released on November 9th, 1999, it was my dad's 50th birthday, which I realized I'm 3 years to like less than 3 years away from my 50th birthday. And I like this album, I remember very well when it came out. So it's just like having one of those moments of being like, holy crap, that's where
And
my dad was when,
it's right around the time when Fiona Apple usually releases another album, like 7 years
I
after a
know.
previous
Yeah.
one. So maybe she'll release one that day.
Well, this one was like, what, 3 years, I think. Her first, that 96 was Tidal, I believe, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
episode 55, we covered that.
55, yeah. So When the Pawn comes in at number 77 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 6 in 1999, number 435 of all time. It's Fiona Apple's second highest rated album behind 2012's The Idler Wheel, another long title there. When the Pawn is the only album that we're covering tonight that made Rolling Stone's list, and it hit at number 108 there. And Fiona Apple ranked number 150 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. So this album's full title is a poem that she wrote, and it goes like this: When the pawn hits the conflicts, he thinks like a king. What he knows throws the blows when he goes to the fight, and he'll win the whole thing, for he enters the ring. There's nobody to batter when your mind is your might, so when you go solo, you hold your own hand. And remember that depth is the greatest of heights, and if you know where you stand, then you know where to land. And if you fall, it won't matter, and if you fail, it won't matter, because you'll know that you're right. So does anybody care to guess what inspired her to write that poem and make it the album title here?
Is it a breakup?
Nope. Although a lot of this album is very much inspired by tumultuous relationships.
Yeah.
Nope. John, any guesses? Or
Specifically why she picked that poem?
yeah, well, she wrote this poem. There was a specific reason that she wrote this poem and what she was going through at the time.
Is it about fame? And like
Kind
struggling?
of, yeah. It's
Okay,
about
yeah.
she wrote it after she read
Like
a number
when
of
the
letters.
pawn, right? Like it's a lonely small piece on the board, right? So,
Well,
okay.
it's specifically related to some letters that appeared in Spin from fans regarding an article that had cast her in a negative light in an earlier issue. So this is kind of a response to essentially negative press. And if you guys remember, she was being made fun of. She got criticized for the sexuality of something like the Criminal video. She got won an award at the MTV Video Music Awards, and she kind of went off and she's like, don't let anybody tell you what to do, and it came off as kind of like,
Well, no,
people
she
were
said
making
this
fun
is
of
all
her- of it.
bullshit, right? She
Yeah,
said
it's all
this
bull-
whole scene's all bullshit. Yeah,
Oh,
I
this
remember
seems
that.
bullshit. Don't let anybody tell you what things. Yeah, stuff like that. So, and so she later said that of this title, it came from being made fun of, and then of course it becomes a thing that I'm being made fun of for. So actually at the time, the length of this, the title's length for this record earned it a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records in 2001. But then in 2007, it was defeated by Soulwax, released an album called Most of the Remixes, which is a much longer title than that. It's a remix album that surpassed When the Pawn's length by 100 characters at 552, but that was only that only held the record for a very short period of time, when it was taken over by none other than Chumbawamba. So they currently still have the longest album title for their album. 2008's The Boy Bands Have Won.
You can almost say when they did the new thing, Matt, that they got knocked out by Chumbawamba, right?
I got down. Yeah.
Got knocked down. And whereas the previous record had 552 characters, Chumbawamba's has 865, and it remains the record holder for the longest album title. So there you go, Congrats, Chumbawamba. So When the Pawn received a Grammy nomination for the Best Alternative Music Album in 2001, but lost to Kid A. By the way, this album's released in 1999, and it's up for a Best Album in 2001. So it's kind of like a weird timing. I guess it's late 1999, but still, I thought that was interesting. She also got a nomination for Paper Bag for Best Female Rock Performance, but that lost to Sheryl Crow's live version of There Goes the Neighborhood, not the studio version. So the concept of this record came off the heels of the controversy of her previous album. Like I said, she was at the time of recording this record, she was involved in a relationship with film director Paul Thomas Anderson. And she later described the challenges of that relationship, which are reflected on this album, as well as references to her other relationships and to herself as well. So this album did pretty well. It peaked at number 13 on the U.S. charts. And we're going to cover more Fiona Apple later on. But let's start off with, I don't know whose turn it is. Is it? John, we'll start with you. What'd you think of When the Pawn?
I mean, I'm going to start, not that this surprises me, but I'm going to have to start moving Fiona Apple into the John tier artists right here, like people that speak to me, because there is just something about the lyrics she writes and the choices she makes musically that very much appeals to my sensibility. If Midwest emo does not appeal to my sensibilities, like the last album, like what Fiona Apple's take on life, even if sometimes it's messy and cynical at times and dark, but there's a recipe in terms of how she presents stories in a literary nature. She's great at telling stories and putting it all out there and being literary, but not in a way that seems hacky. It's it's very authentic, and it speaks to me, mess and all. And the way she writes about relationships, she feels deeply, but it's not trite either, or even overdramatic. Either way, right? It's not trite or overdramatic, and I really enjoyed this album from start to finish. I liked Tidal a lot too, but whereas Tidal was a very good mainstream pop singer-songwriter album, this is where you start to get, I think, what Fiona Apple becomes in later albums, whether it be Fetch the Bolt Cutters or Idler Wheel, right? All of those different albums to come later, that you're starting to, not just with the piano and her voice, you're also starting to get more lush instrumentation, more not quite avant-garde sounds, but she's throwing in almost like found sounds at different times. Interesting percussion is in the background, and then it's thrown together with at times these like devastatingly confessional but also razor sharp analysis in the way that only someone who spends a lot of time in their thoughts, which of course I can relate to, can speak about, right? You just feel like these have been curated and crafted as lyrics in her mind for a while until she finds a precision to certain word choices she has, but then she's imprecise in other choices she makes by choice, right? To express that mix between the emotional end of things and that logic overthinker end of things. And I know that she struggled with things like anxiety and OCD, and eating disorders, but I think in this case, I'm doing it more to OCD and anxiety. And there is sort of that run of, an overthinker mixed with a deep feeler, which can be a difficult way to live life, right? And go through life and experience relationships and process different stuff. And I always admire like the bravery of Fiona Apple's albums. I always admired the fact that she wasn't afraid to take chances and be sort of who she was. And she's right. There was a period where she became, for a certain, I'm gonna go defend Fiona Apple right here. She became an easy punching bag for people that I don't think spend a lot of time thinking about the world and go for easy answers. And so it became easy just to call her like a modern girl, like a whiny girl, like a scene star. She just sort of became offhand for a lot of people that don't really want to think too hard, if I'm being honest. And I think she was aware of that, but she was politic enough to not say that. She tried to couch it, and I think she got a bad rap by a lot of people. I think she became easy to parody, and once again, we've talked about it before, but man, when I read these reviews, I'm reminded it wasn't just the 60s, 70s, and 80s where there was shitty music critics. This like late 90s, 2000s pitchforky era was also a really shitty type of guy who felt a weird agency that somehow they were more enlightened than the people before them, but they were every bit as shitty and maybe even more shitty, you know. And a lot of these people were commenting on women's records, and they had a very specific idea of what supposedly, you know, good or edgy or valid women could do. And while Fiona Apple would get her flowers from some of it, you read a lot of things of like, this album is confessional, and at times it seems somewhat sophomoric and stuff. And it's always a guy writing that, right? You never hear a woman say it. And I think it's because she's writing from a standpoint that's more complex than they really want to admit that they can understand. And you just see that type of review over and over and over again for female artists in the late 90s and early 2000s, not to white knight too much. And, you know, Fiona Apple certainly doesn't need me to white knight for her. She's strong enough on her own. But are there still callbacks, like we talked about Tidal, to some of her influences, like Nina Simone and Billie Holiday on one end, and then people like Tori Amos on another end, Laura Nero, right? Fellow New Yorker. Yes, but I think this is where in Tidal, it seemed like the greatest hits of all that, and I loved it, but it did feel as if she was doing her version of that. This is when I think she's becoming her own distinct artist with her own sort of tropes, like the Fiona Apple tropes that you would see later. And I'm here for it. I really like this album. It has high replayability for me, and we're going to do a lot of Fiona Apple because her albums always have a level of critical acclaim, as they should, and she always kind of keeps me on my toes, and she just really hits a lot of the buttons of things that speak to me both musically and lyrically, and I think she'd be a good hang for me. I think I'd enjoy spending time with her. So not that I need that for a musician, but I do think she'd be a really interesting person to talk to and to know. So for whatever that's worth, last postscript there, thumbs up for me.
Yeah, this is a thumbs up for me too. This is a great album. I like this album. You know, I was kind of lukewarm, I think, on Tidal when we talked about that, but I like this album a lot more than that album, and responded to it almost immediately. I agree with you, John. This album gets better the more you listen to it as well, and actually I think this album gets better the deeper you go into the album. I think it starts off strong, but I think by like the midway point, kind of through the end, that's like really the strong or the peak of the album for me. From Paper Bag, A Mistake, Fast as You Can, and the way things are. That like 4-song set there is like top notch. Just from a musical standpoint, like I really like kind of her command of the piano and how that and her voice, those two combination together. She's got this huskiness to her voice that I really like, and the piano sound that she uses often has kind of like this dark quality to it. It's a little like, I don't know, edgy piano, I guess. But she also adds a lot of more depth and complexity with other instruments in the background on this album. You know, there's some strings. I think you touched on this, John. Like she adds more depth or more kind of compliments to her. It's not just her and the piano. Is ultimately that also works really well. I think she's leaning more into the kind of maybe some pop sensibilities as well. There's some songs on here that I think were released as singles that are really strong. You know, candidates for grabbing people and getting them into the album. I think Paper Bag and Fast as You Can would be examples of that as well.
Get Gone was a pretty big hit too.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's another good one. Late track, second to last track, and even I can recognize, like, I think that she even on the cursory like listens that I got lyric wise on this album, like I can hear the command of her lyrics and kind of, I think you said incisiveness, John, like the incisiveness of that, kind of the way of words that she has. And that's another level that you can go on with this album is reading the lyrics, obviously. And that's a level I didn't get to, but I want to point out that like I could even hear that just like the times that I listened to it,
Mm-hmm.
not going so in depth. And I think that's
She
powerful.
also not just the words themselves, but the way she strings them together and the way they sound in that poetic way. A good example of that is "Get Gone," like how she writes that chorus. That it's great words, but it's also how the words build to the chorus as well. If you know what, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so all of that together makes this
Like the "How can I deal with this if you won't get with this? I'm gonna heal with this." It's kind of creative how it makes sense, but also builds. So for
Yeah.
what it's worth. Yeah.
Yeah, she has a gift for melody too, I think, with a lot of these songs, like you just pointed out. And I think this album is really, as a result, like the complete package of like, I think she's one of the strongest, singer songwriters that's going on right now at this time period in the late 90s that we've talked about. And I think she's following in a strong lineage of other female singer songwriters that we've talked about. You touched on some of them too, but even like Tori Amos and others, also that, or Kate Bush even. Like, I think she's in that category of like elite female singer songwriters that can kind of do it all on their albums, and I really like that. So it's thumbs up for me. Strong week for albums.
Yeah, I have a distinct memory of the first time I heard this record at a college party. My buddy had it, and we were like at one of the beach houses in Connecticut where we went to school, and I remember just like thinking like, holy crap, like what? This is not. I remembered Fiona Apple from the Criminal song, and I liked that, but it never struck me as like somebody like, oh, I want to go out and like hear her new record. And as soon as I heard this, I was just like, man, it's really interesting. There's so much happening in this album, musically, lyrically, just production wise, the different instruments that she's incorporating, and the genre bending that it's doing. It's just like so much stuff. And so I was immediately taken with this record, particularly my favorite song on this, which you guys mentioned a couple times, but "Get Gone" is just a phenomenal song. It's the way that she does that thing where it does this like this little chord, this little note that she throws in there, but you're not Bennett, like this, it just goes up like a half step or whatever, and it's like not what you think she'd be doing. And just for a while, it just surprised me. It continually surprised me when she did that. It sounded so different, but it felt so right, and it just gave it so much more depth. It's been a while since I listened to this album, and I forgot how good it was. Like this is my elite album of the week. I think in some ways you guys undersold. I think this album is fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's elite for me. It's elite for me too. Yeah,
this could easily make my top 20 of the decade. I mean, that's kind of where I'm landing on it this way. And I only listened to this album twice this week, and it was just that I'm like, yep, keep it coming, right? And it just, the journey that she takes you on in just over 40 minutes is pretty remarkable, right? Like the instrumentation, she's got some really, the percussion, you mentioned that, John. I think the drummer on this, I learned a little bit about him. His name's Matt Chamberlain. He drummed for a bunch of it. He drummed with Pearl Jam. He's actually, I guess he's in the Alive video, is like he's playing in that, but he's played with like a ton of artists, and the way that he's playing, the syncopation, the offbeats, all that stuff that we were talking about earlier with American football. I mean, he's kind of all over the place with what he's doing. It's very jazzy too, right? Like there's like a big jazz element to this record. But I like how she can take something that's so soft and so quiet and so gentle, and then just boom, and just all of a sudden throw all this stuff at you, and throw this anger, and throw this passion, and throw the, it makes it so interesting, and re-listenability all over the place with this. It's, if I were to pick song, I mean, Get Gone's probably my favorite, but like, God, what else? Paper Bag, A Mistake, Fast as You Can. There's not a bad song on here. And I love how she spaces out like the two songs on here that are really truly kind of more of the ballad, quiet, just piano driven songs, and Love Ridden at track 4, and I Know closing the record, which is a great way to close the record. I just love how it just, you've kind of been dealing with all this emotion and all this energy, and then you kind of just like boom, and then there's just this really soft, beautiful piano ballad that's being played there. It's just a great record. What is it? Yeah, the choruses and how she just from high to low, right? From like nothing to like all of everything. And her voice is great. The lyrics are super like it's amazing to me that Paul Thomas Anderson was dating her at the time of this record, and he directed the videos for the singles of this. And it's clear, like, and it's like I think a lot of this is about him specifically. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting that it's like that both of those things are happening at the same time. So this
well, it has a movie feel to it as an album. It feels like a movie, in some ways. Yeah.
But it's interesting that he's like, the topic of her ire, this to me is a huge step up from Tidal. I didn't really know the Tidal album that well, and I liked it. There are some really strong songs on it, but it was a couple of really strong songs, and then like the rest of it was a good album. This is like, she's not missing one note on this. I think this is fantastic. The personnel that she chose to play, the behind her, I love her piano playing. It's throwing so many different things at you, and it never gets old. And I was pleasantly surprised coming back to it going, this is just as good, if not better than what I remember it being, because it had been a while since I listened to this. So I love this. This is I want to go back to her. I'm looking forward to covering her other records that we're going to be doing as well, but I think she's a superior talent, and this is that huge thumbs up for me. I love this record.
I seem to remember in Tidal when you guys were like a little bit more like, oh, I'll be curious. I'm like, I was doing the hosannas on that one. Like I think I said something like, there isn't a bad Fiona Apple album. They're just various levels of very good. It's great, right?
I still think that was good.
I always will say that because that's how I feel. Yeah.
I still think that was a good record, but it was also like, I think in some ways it was knowing where she went, she's like kind of still finding her way a little bit. And this is, to me, this is a fully formed like Fiona Apple.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I just always go back to like she wrote fucking Shadow Boxer when she was like 15 years old, which is fucking amazing. It's like you have to also have context, right? Like this is a version of her that's done an album, toured. She's still very young and stuff, but there's just stuff on that it's like, you could see that it's the proto album, but it's also like, how the fuck do you write that song like in your mid-teens? You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So
she was what? She was what, 22, I think, when this came out, somewhere around there. So like, man. Crazy. So good stuff.